Before the strings go back on, I've got some Dunlop 65 Ultimate Lemon Oil. So the final thing to do on the Mustang is to set it up, and that's going to include filing the grooves in the nut so the strings sit in there properly, lowering the action, keeping that nice and low, adjusting the truss rod if it needs it, and setting the saddles and the intonation. So yeah, here we go. Remember to do this in small increments because you can file it down, you can't file it up. Just a heads up on the quality control of the bridge. There is, I don't know what this is called, but one of these pieces is missing. So I've got to try and find if I've got any spares. See, just a hole there. Okay, so I had a look in the box for the Mustang, and guess what was floating around at the bottom of the box? There it is, cool, let's put it in. I've had a little problem with the grub screws in the bridge just deciding to loosen themselves and come out whenever they want to. And when playing the E string, for example, the grub screw was actually vibrating. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a bit of Loctite 243, which is a screw, safety screw lock stuff. It's like a glue, but it's not actually a glue. It's like a little plastic polymer that goes around the threads and keeps it tight. So I pop a bit on there. It's quite liquid. You don't need much. I've never used this on a guitar before, but I've used it on electric boards all the time, and I see no reason as to why it shouldn't help, because it's basically doing the same thing. Keeping a thread where it should be. Bit of excess there. Okay, I'm going to do the rest of the guitar, rest of the grub screws, and get back to you. I've changed the method I'm using. I'm actually not going to take the grub screw all the way out. I'm just going to drop a little bit on there on the thread closest to the saddle. So the deeper you can get in, the better, and that'll get it into the internal thread. Then I'm taking it in further than it needs to go, bringing it back out. And later, after this is done, I will check the radius again with my radius checker. Just to clarify, this is Loctite 243. This is made for this job. Not on a guitar, but any thread that needs to be kept tight, but also still mobile. So, don't use super glue. This is not super glue. I just hope no one's going to write in the comments, I bought some Loctite and now I can't adjust my saddle. It's not super glue. Okay, so that's done. All of the threads have got Loctite 243 on them, not super glue. And I've now messed up the radius slightly, so I've got to go with my radius checker and reset the radius. I looked up the specs on the Fender website, and the radius of the fretboard is 12. So you need your number 12 fretboard radius checker. So the first step with your radius checker is to put it under the strings, and above the scratch plate obviously, and then stick it up here on your fretboard to make sure that it is the correct radius gauge. And the bottom of the radius checker should be flat against the fretboard. I've checked the Fender website, I know this is a 12 radius, and then drag it back towards the bridge. Careful not to damage anything. Come on, Butterfingers. There we go. Place it under the strings, and what I like to do is to find the lowest point of this low E string and make sure it's in tune. Give it a little pull, And that is definitely too low. You can hear it buzzing. So that's going to come up a little bit. And this Loctite 243 has made these screws really, really quite, not too tight, but comfortably tight. That's cool. Then all you have to do is, using your Allen key and these grub screws, adjust the height of each saddle so that the strings sit at exactly the same radius as the fretboard. And you can do that by making sure that you put it up and rest it on the two outer strings, and make sure that every string is set on the radius checker. We're going for a shaky hand cam now. This is the radius checker just underneath the strings, and I've set it, and each string is sitting just on top of the radius checker, just on here. Might need some fine tunings. I've done that by eye, but yeah, it looks pretty good to me. I'll fine tune it and get back to you. So that's everything fine tuned. We're using the radius gauge number 12, and I like to give the saddles a little squeeze as well inside, because these two tend to go in this direction. The bridge and the saddles are not great quality, so they're not going to respond very well. Adding that Loctite stuff really helped. As you can see, I've done a rough intonation setting, so they should be sort of low E backwards, A slightly forward, D slightly forward, G slightly back again, B slightly forward, and E slightly forward. So sort of like that. The strings I'm going to be using are Elixir NanoWeb 10s. The guitar came set up with 9s, but I prefer 10s. I think it gives it a bit more of a meaty sound. Where's my neck rest? There. Yeah, so putting 10s on it will thicken up that sound a little, and also the 9s were a little bit too bendy for me because of the shorter scale. So let's whack all these off. I'm going to do the strings one by one, and off we go. I've put a bone nut in here, as you saw from the other video, and bone nuts apparently have the best tone. But what I can tell you is that they do tend to stick ever so slightly. So I've got here it's just some simple lip balm. I'm going to take a bit off with my X-Acto knife and pop it in the nut slot. There are other things you can do. You can use graphite or a pencil. And this just lubricates that nut slot ever so much. You don't need very much. There we go. That's it. And this doesn't have a trem system, so it hopefully shouldn't be that much of a problem. But nobody wants sticky nuts. The next thing is the intonation. In the out-of-the-box review I did, the first video featuring this Mustang, quite a few people said that the guitar was out of tune, and they were right, and they were also wrong in the sense that the guitar open strum that was tuned, so this was E, A, D, G, B, E. However, when you fretted a note, this sounded out of tune. I was playing some chords all over the place, and the chords sounded out of tune, and the reason for that is that the intonation's out. Now, there are many videos around the internet telling you how to intonate your guitar, so I'm not going to go into that. But I am going to intonate it very quickly and speed the video up so you can watch me doing it, and then we'll get round to playing it. Cool.